Hey there everyone! Today, as promised, I'm going to bring you the second part of that little double feature I mentioned yesterday. This is another in the line of interesting shmups with loot systems and things that I've been seeing on Steam lately. This is a game by Heliocentric Studios, and it is called Gran Vitreous, which is a very interesting name and I don't think has anything to do with your eyes, although the game might make them bleed a little bit because it's very colorful. It's not quite Beat Hazard levels of like seizure-inducing, but it's getting there. So Gran Vitreous is a little bit different than the game I covered yesterday, Starship Rubicon, in that GV is a twin-stick shooter style of game, actually very reminiscent of Geometry Wars, with some light RPG mechanics and some slightly more eye-melting visuals, and that's a good thing, it's quite pretty. So let's just basically hop into it immediately, because there's not a lot else to say until we actually get going. And I'm using a controller for this one. I used a mouse and keyboard for Starship Rubicon because it controls very well with a mouse. However, this game, it does control with mouse and keyboard fairly well, but I think being a twin-stick shooter, it actually works a lot better with a controller. So yeah. Let us go. So here we are. This is your main screen, and here you can see that there are some RPG mechanics, like for instance, this skill tree. You will get levels from completing missions, and you can level up and put skill points into these trees. And they're fairly basic. There's nothing like extremely interesting here, but they are quite effective, and it can be quite satisfying to kind of build yourself up to be able to take on the tougher missions without getting horrendously murdered. And the actual gameplay itself is very, very smooth and very satisfying. Again, very reminiscent of Geometry Wars. It's similar in its kind of smoothness and how it controls very well. And also, the game has a very interesting kind of action RPG style loot system. You can equip your ship with different pieces of loot, and all of these different slots, and they even have colors, as you can see. This is a yellow, which is rare, this is a blue, which is uncommon, this is a white, which is normal, etc., etc. And you can have all of these. You will always have a secondary and super weapon, but also your main weapons you can actually have 4 of, equipped at any given time. However, the only really good one I have right now is this chain gun, but this laser beam is also pretty good. This charger should be, like, unequipped or something. I should probably sell it. Anyway, so you'll be able to switch between any of those 4 weapons during a match that you want to. You can switch on the fly with pretty much no penalty. And your secondary weapons have a limited ammunition supply, so you gotta be careful with how you use your secondary, and your super weapon has a very limited ammo supply, but it is of course very, very powerful, and there are some really interesting ones, like this cascade grenade, a supernova, and even a black hole bomb, and they are as cool as they sound. You also have the basics: shield, a utility, which is usually some kind of movement ability. In this case, it actually makes me sort of phase out of existence so I can go through bullets and things for a couple seconds. And then your basic hull. Now, as you can see, they all have action RPG style statistics on them, so crit chance, percentages of extra health, recharge delay, all kinds of stuff like that. And that is interesting, and there is, in the trade station here, you can of course buy and sell, like you would expect, but also, you can do engineering, which is to actually basically re-roll and change the attributes on an item, which is kind of cool. So if I choose this, for instance, I can't improve it anymore because it's already a rare, but if it was, say, an uncommon, I could spend a bunch of credits to turn it into a rare and roll it with some new statistics. And with these, I can re-roll different attributes of the item, like the extra ones, for instance, or re-roll every single one of them, or even just get one of them a different kind of number. And these can be very expensive, but what this reminds me of is actually Path of Exile. It sounds weird, I know, because the game is obviously nothing like it, but the loot system and the way that you're kind of encouraged to get a specific piece of loot and then micromanage it by spending, putting various currency items, or in this case your credits, into it to actually kind of optimize it for you. That's pretty cool, and I like that quite a lot. You also have a charge shot, which is something I'll explain once we get into the game. But here we go, to the galaxy. Now, this game is actually pretty difficult, I've got to admit, so I've only got the first sector unlocked right now. They get harder and harder and longer, and I think there are even boss fights and stuff. But as you can see, you can enter the sector at various stages. So if I wanted to, I could pay a bunch of credits to enter 3/4 of the way through, where the missions will start at level 22, but I'm only like level... I don't think I'm even level 8 yet, so that would be absolute suicide for me to do that, but you can. Basically, you can spend credits to boost your way through a little quicker if you're already at a much higher level and you feel like doing the earlier missions is a bit of a waste of your time. So even though it is kind of permadeath-ish, as in when you lose all your lives, you're finished with that run and you go back with all your credits to the menu, your levels stay, obviously your skill points stay, your equipment stays, and so that means that even though it's a fresh start every time, you can still choose to start further in advance in the actual sector by paying a bit. Which is always good for those of you that eventually get pretty, far into it. So this is how it works, and you only have one zone to start with at first, but of course, as you see here, the entire galaxy map goes on for quite a while, and there's the end. So the missions will kind of web along in a similar way to the way that Starship Rubicon does it. Now, every zone has a level, which will, of course, be the level of the enemies and the loot and things like that. And, of course, they have little interesting variations. This one, for instance, the actual size of the level is 129% of normal, but the enemies are also larger. There's only going to be one main enemy type that spawns, and they're going to do over 1.5 times the damage to me if they hit me. So this is actually quite a dangerous zone, but it's giving me a little bit more of an arena to roam around in, so... Here we go. Those are all randomly generated every time. And here we go. So, oh my goodness. The every zone also has a bonus objective that's randomly generated when you go into it. Damn it, I failed it. And the bonus objective gives you more credits by the end of it if you're able to complete it. Okay, and as you can see, just massive color everywhere. Tons and tons of color. There's just particles all over the place. Again, a lot like Geometry Wars, only I would say even more intense. So that was it. That was one mission. Very quick. Now they also, of course, get longer and more difficult, but that's, how it works. So I'm level 11, that's right. So the level 1 zone is going to give me basically no experience at all, but a bit of credits. So moving on. A level 2 zone. This one's going to have extra power-ups, and I'm going to do more damage, but it's smaller. Some of them, by the way, can have very interesting characteristics, like giving you infinite ammo for your super weapon, or something like that. Now, there are lots and lots of enemy types, as you can already see. There are several. And what that basically means is, in a similar way to the way Geometry Wars works, you're encouraged to learn them slowly by kind of identifying their colors and shapes, which will eventually allow you to figure out what's what at a glance. So the game doesn't really have a tutorial, and it very much throws you in just right from the start. It is quite challenging, and that means that you're going to die a lot, which is obviously part of the point of the game. There's no way you're going to be able to make it all the way through in your first run. You're not going to be the proper level or have the proper loot. You're going to have to do it multiple times. Many times, in fact. But the fact that, of course, every zone is randomly generated with different levels, with different goals, and different extra kind of parameters that are generated with it means that every run is a bit different, which I like. So this is a level 4 zone with some kind of anomaly to it, which could be a variety of things. There's a little store here, which I'm not really interested in right now. You can buy extra lives at the store, which is fairly important. And that is a... let's do this one. Oh. I guess I'll fight back. Whoa! Oh my god, so much green! Ow. Okay. Alright. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Whew. So, you're constantly seeing things dropping, and you have to collect them. There are lots of power-ups to do different things, invincibility, extra ammo, doubling your fire rate, things like that. And there are also item drops in a typical kind of ARPG loot style, and there are credit drops as well. Now, that was actually a bit of an interesting mission where I had to make a choice, and the mission variety is actually pretty ridiculous in this. There's a lot of different ones. There are stations to destroy, there are bosses, there are big motherships, there are various types of hazards and anomalies that you may face. There's actually a lot to the game, and that kind of brings me on to one of the really strong points of it, and that is the amount of content on offer. There's actually a lot. Now this is the charge shot. Basically, if you hold the trigger, you charge up and you suck in all of those particles around you, and when you get enough, the charge shot turns blue, which means you can release and use it. And if you actually get even more than that, it turns purple, and that is like a supercharged version of the charge shot. Now the charge shot not only relies on you actually being able to kill enemies around you to get all that storm of particles, but also it changes depending on what weapon you have equipped. So with this chain gun equipped, it's basically a little storm of particles around me, but since there are a lot of different weapons you could have, it changes the actual... Oh, I should use my secondary more, I didn't even notice the bonus objective there. It changes the actual characteristics of your charge, which is cool. Variety is good. Alright, this is a mothership zone, so let's go into this. So, I think you're probably getting the idea already. It's very fast and very hectic and very pretty. Ah! And more or less, this is how it's going to work the entire way through, only as you get to higher level zones, there are going to be a lot more enemy types, just more enemies in general, of course, boss type encounters, and much more difficult things to actually get your way through, and the actual way that the enemies work together can change. As you could probably notice, there's some of those enemies that I was facing. Actually, those blue things right there, they have like a sort of tractor beam that slows you down and pulls you in, which makes some of the really fast enemies that don't shoot anything but try to ram into you a lot more dangerous, and so on and so forth. So, as you continue on, you will find some very kind of annoying enemy combinations, but that's part of the point. Solar pressure detected. Alright, this basically... the solar pressure anomaly randomly pushes you towards the edges of the stage occasionally, and if you slam into it, it will do a huge amount of damage to you, so you've got to be really, like that, you got to be careful. You got to fight against the current, or else you'll get slammed against the side of the stage and probably die. So, yeah, you're seeing most of what it has to offer. A lot of particle effects, a good variety of weapons to equip, and there are some really fun and interesting ones, each with their own unique two-stage charge shot. A lot of loot, a lot of optimization of the loot you already have, lots of enemy variety, challenging missions, oftentimes, and a very, very striking style. But I think the main point to make here is the price they're asking for this game. The game is only $5. It is very cheap, and I think a lot of people would be willing to pay $10 for it, to be honest, because... I mean, a lot of these sorts of games are at that price point, but they decided to go for $5, which is just beyond fair. It is a very good price, and that means that you can pretty much jump into the game immediately without feeling like you've got to get like a huge amount of time out of it to make your purchase worthwhile, but it will be worthwhile, more than likely. There's actually a lot here to enjoy, and it certainly does get very, very challenging, and what you're seeing now is only the first world of 4 or 5, and these are only like single-digit level missions, and there are much, much harder, much larger missions later on. What that means is that you will be given quite a challenge and a lot of content with a pretty good amount of variety to help keep you going. If you really enjoyed things like Geometry Wars, this is that turned up to a kind of RPG style 11, basically. And I really like it. I gotta say, I really, really like it. It's really fast, it's really hectic, it's really colorful, and there's so much variety for the price point that it really is easy to keep yourself going on it. I approve. So yeah, this is Gran Vitreous. If it interests you, I will of course post the link in the description, and I highly recommend you give it a shot. Yay, level up! Woo! Also, your ship changes color depending on what kind of weapon you have equipped. That's not that important, but I like it. Let's continue. So if oh, this is a really small zone, and I have to kill all of the enemies before reinforcements arrive. Alright, I think I can do that. I definitely like the variety in loot. I like that there are a lot of primary weapons to choose, and I like that there are a lot of super weapons to choose from, and even secondaries have a lot of variety. There are homing missiles, grenades, mines, turrets, all kinds of stuff, really. There's actually a lot on offer here. And I also very much love the fact that every weapon has its own charge shot that can differ greatly. In fact, let me just use a laser to show you what that's like. The laser has this sort of limited range to it, but it does like a lot of damage per second, more or less. That keeps things going, and its charge shot is a bunch of rotating beams that circle around you for a minute. Some of the charge shots are actually very short range and situational, but very effective against like large enemies, smaller number of larger enemies. That weird photon caster weapon thing, which I don't have right now, has a really interesting charge shot. So yeah, this is basically how it works, and this is only the early stages of the game. It gets much more complicated than this. And again, I have to emphasize that it is only $5. Just hideously fair. There's the charge shot. Ooh, that was really good. That just decimated the boss. So yeah, I'm having way too much fun with it. It's one of those editing games that I will come back to during editing and when I'm rendering videos and stuff and don't have a whole lot else to do. Yeah, it'll probably run on just about anything, even though it's very, very pretty with lots of particle effects and things. And it is not in early access either. This is a fully featured, finished game with a good amount of support. It actually just recently received a very large update just about a week ago. That added, what did it add? It added like 2 new primary weapons, like some sort of lightning gun and a couple other things. It did some balance changes and changed a couple of things around. They're still supporting the game, and there's probably still going to be more added to it on top of what's already there. So this is a very, very good offering, in my opinion. It is very well worth your time if you like games like this. And again, if you really like Geometry Wars, this feels a lot like it. It's very reminiscent of Geometry Wars, only I would say maybe even a bit faster paced, a bit more hectic, and the addition of that loot system just makes it very, very difficult to say no. There we go. So, Gran Vitreous, everyone. I hope you check it out, because it's very much worth your time. If you like arcadey-styled twin-stick shooters, this is an extremely good choice. The loot system does more than just carry it. So, thanks very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the little double feature of games. I might do things like this a little more often, because you often find, especially in the indie scene, that there will be multiple games with similar kind of goals and design decisions coming out in kind of similar time frames, and I think this is a good way to be able to cover more games in a shorter period of time. So anyway, tell me what you think if you want, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.